While we were all focused on the Steam Machine and Steam Frame, Valve was busy filing a patent that teases either the Steam Deck's next revision or even the Steam Deck 2. After that, let's talk about how there's a bunch of new customization options for the Steam Deck available now. And finally, let's talk about Android coming to Steam and why. How's it going, everyone? As always, my name is Jimmy Champagne. This is Deck Ready, my channel all about Steam hardware. I hope you're having a great week playing a ton of video games. I have not been playing games because I've been learning a lot about Linux. I'll save that for the end of the video, so stick around if you're interested. There's a ton of new people who got Steam Decks. I'm seeing new people in the comments all the time, so if you've watched any of these videos lately and you enjoy them, subscribe and set your notifications to all. But let's roll into the first news story here and talk about Valve's latest patent, because this one is really interesting. So this is coming from, sadly it's Bradley, Brad Lynch, whoever you want to call him or whatever you want to call him on Twitter. He's the guy who digs into all these files and finds things like the Steam controller months before it's announced. He found the Steam Frames controllers. He found the Steam Frame itself. He's one of the best sources for leaking Valve hardware just by digging into public files Valve puts out there. So they're really the most trustworthy leaks possible because they're not really even leaks. And what he was able to discover is a new patent for an upgraded Steam Deck case. And like, I know it's not the most exciting thing in the world because you don't need a Steam Deck case, because any Steam Deck you buy, whether it's the LCD or the OLED, comes with a free case. But when you look at the features it brings along with it, it instantly becomes a lot more interesting. So it looks like they're taking the technology they developed for the Steam controller, specifically the puck. If you missed this in the Steam hardware overview, every Steam controller comes with a glorified dongle, essentially. Like, it's not that exciting, but what it does is allow your PC to connect directly to the controller, so you'll get latency-free connection that won't drop out like Bluetooth does, but it also doubles as a charging dock. There's like a magnetic pin attachment. You drop the controller on, it charges when you're done playing. When you lift it back off the charger, the puck, whatever you want to call it, your controller will be fully charged and ready to go. And it looks like they want to take that technology and build it into the Steam Deck's case. And this would be a really good upgrade, because I know a lot of people, myself included, like charging the Steam Deck when it's in the case because it gives the back of it a little protection from sliding across the floor or something like that. And you know, they did upgrade the case for the Steam Deck OLED based on people doing that, because a lot of people would put their Steam Deck in the case while it was charging. Then when it was charged, they'd unplug it and someone would walk by and close the case. They'd go to grab the case, the Steam Deck would fall out. So with the OLED upgrade, they added a Velcro flap. So if you close the case, even if you don't use the zipper, it stays closed. So it's a pretty good upgrade. And I actually read the patent. It doesn't seem like they hint towards this, but I would love that little puck inside the case to have an independent battery, so you could just charge the case. And then when you take it out of your house, if the Steam Deck is in the case, it'll stay charged while the case is closed. And then you would just plug the case in and never need to use the USB port on your Steam Deck unless you're sitting on the couch playing a game or something like that. There's one big problem with all of this though. Neither of the current Steam Decks that are out right now would have any way to wirelessly charge, right? Like, there's no charging pins on the back. There's no wireless charging technology built into the Steam Deck. So there's like three paths they could go down here. One of them, which I think is the least likely, would be releasing a new battery and a new back shell for the Steam Deck that allows it to connect to a wireless charger that might come with the case. It's doable, and I don't think it's the most difficult thing in the world to upgrade the battery or even, you know, upgrade the back shell, because that would just involve taking off 6 screws, taking off the shell, popping the new one on. But once you start dealing with the battery, I think that's a little bit out of people's realm of what they want to do, because you have to like undo some glue and things like that. You have to use a heat gun. You have to unplug the battery. It's not difficult, like I said earlier, but it's not necessarily super simple either, and not something that Valve would necessarily, I think, want to put in the general user's hands. The second way this could appear is in another hardware revision of the Steam Deck, and that also feels less likely to me, because they've said in multiple interviews since the Steam Deck OLED came out that really the reason they made the Steam Deck OLED in the first place was to just perfect the original version of the Steam Deck, and they feel like that's what they did. And I agree, like, they fixed every minor issue I had with the Steam Deck LCD and added an OLED screen on top of it. So doing another hardware revision when, you know, like all the major software updates are pretty much out, all the features are added, and you've kind of perfected the hardware from point A to point where you want it to be. So then that leaves the third possibility, which I think is the most likely, which is that this technology is for the Steam Deck 2. This would be a really cool hardware upgrade, but the real reason that's exciting to me is because it shows that, you know, the Steam Deck 2 is not a far off thing that they haven't started working on yet, right? Like, you know, Valve's a small company, they have a hardware team, but it seems like they aren't putting things on the shelf while they work on other things, right? Like, they didn't just stop working on the Steam Deck 2 to work on the Steam Machine and Steam Frame, it seems like they're working on all three in tandem. And I like that this is being seen as a sort of like umbrella over all of the hardware, right? Like it's the Steam hardware ecosystem where they develop technology for the controller, like the puck, and then they say, hey, this technology of linking the puck to the controller to charge it would be really cool for our portable handheld. So then they start working on a case that includes that technology as well. Or maybe they started working on this case first, and then they were like, this would be great for the controller we're working on, and then they upgraded the controller to take advantage of that. And then when it comes to the Steam Machine being able to download game updates in sleep mode, they were like, why not add that to the Steam Deck as well? So like at least the gears are turning and they're looking at these different devices and cool features that are made that would seem like second nature for one device, but would improve the experience overall on another. And they're all kind of cyclically feeding each other with great software and hardware upgrades. So for all the people out there who are convinced that we're not seeing a Steam Deck 2 till like 2035, I'm sorry to disappoint you once again. I'm firmly believing that 2027, 2028 rumor. The Strix Halo Point chips are extremely powerful. They're out now. I feel like it's totally within the realm of possibility for those to become efficient enough in the next couple of years to where they'll be able to be as powerful as they are now, but be efficient enough to have the battery life that the Steam Deck currently has with its current chip. And of course, Valve's like whole thing is running these things at super low TDPs and getting great performance out of them. So that will help the battery life as well. So, you know, because the Steam Machine is right around the corner, I don't think that necessarily means they just extended the Steam Deck's life by like 5 or 6 years. Like, you know, I think it's going to be in the next couple of years that we'll see the Steam Deck 2, and then we'll get the Steam Machine 2, Steam Frame, like, you know, it'll just keep going in that cadence forever, hopefully, because these things are awesome. But speaking of great updates coming to the Steam Deck, in terms of customization, Valve just added a ton of new boot animation intros to the Steam Point Store, and I would hazard a guess that you probably have like 600,000 Steam points just sitting there waiting to be spent on boot intros. There are a ton of them, but I'll just tell you a few of my favorites. The first one is Risk of Rain 2. I really want to play this game. I bought it a long time ago. I've never tried it, but I just read a news story that totally went over my head that Valve actually hired the entire dev team of Risk of Rain and Risk of Rain 2, and then they sold the IP to Gearbox, so Gearbox made the newest expansion. I guess they screwed up the first update after their buyout like Gearbox did, and then they've gotten better since then, but Risk of Rain has a link to Valve now, so it's nice to see a boot animation intro because it's technically like a second party or third party Valve game, like 6 Degrees of Kevin Bacon style. My favorite one is the Retrowave 2 one. I put this on my SteamOS PC upstairs because it's a cool like 80s style with a VHS filter intro that has a cool synth background. I couldn't decide if it reminded me of like Wayland stuff from Aliens or if it reminded me of RoboCop. I guess it reminds me of both. It kind of also reminds me of Cyberdyne Systems in Terminator 2, but regardless, I think it's my favorite of the bunch. There's another really cool one where a skull lights a cigarette. I think that's awesome. And then there's an Angry Video Game Nerd one for his new 8-bit game. That guy's the reason I got into YouTube, so it pains me to say this is the laziest boot intro I have seen ever. So maybe skip that one. And there's like 15 more, so you should just go through the Point Shop and add these to your collection. But that brings us to the third topic of today's video, which is a lot of Android updates happening on the back end of Steam. So I think the biggest reason Android APKs are being allowed to work on Steam is because of the Steam Frame. It uses an ARM chip, which is basically the same chips that like Apple computers use or mobile phones use. And if you didn't know, all the apps that you run on like a MetaQuest 3 natively are technically like Android APKs, so they're mobile games. But currently Steam VR games are like x86 PC games, and that's been a big problem for VR developers because if they want to have their game on Steam VR and on the MetaQuest 3, they have to make two versions of the game, which is a bummer because usually they come to MetaQuest first and come to Steam VR later, or one of them gets a lot more prioritization over the other based on what their priorities are. And now, because they have a headset that runs on an ARM chip, they can make one version of the game and put it on Steam and put it on the Metastore and not really have to do a lot of work to make it happen. This is great because apparently this year Meta's entire platform has really just fallen apart. Like it's just not going well. There's a lot of slop on the Meta store, and like the Quest 3 is not getting a lot of game updates or anything like that outside of Deadpool VR. So giving Steam a way to kind of insert itself into the marketplace, I think will only make the Meta situation better, hopefully. But if it doesn't, you have an exit ramp over to Steam, and I would guess that eventually you'll be able to install SteamOS, the headset version, on the MetaQuest 3, and then you can abandon join Meta's entire thing altogether, which is cool. But separately, I don't know if you guys have seen this, but there's a new translation layer for x86 games down to Android called Fex, and it came out that Valve was actually funding the person making it as an independent contractor. And I would guess that they did that to figure out how to get regular old Steam games that work on Windows to work on the Steam Frame headset, because again, it uses an ARM chip. So like if they're making a translation layer for x86 to ARM, they're basically already doing a lot of the work to make a translation layer to get x86 games running on Android. Now, the idea of playing Steam games on my phone obviously is not super interesting to me, but it would give a cool exit ramp out of the Apple App Store if I could just buy games once and play them on my phone, because I do play a lot of mobile games on the treadmill. I just don't want the reverse situation to happen where suddenly a bunch of Android games appear on Steam and clog the entire store. But one way this could come in handy for the Steam machine is it introduces an easy way for Valve to implement or even pre-install apps like Netflix, HBO Max, YouTube, you know, all these streaming apps that should be there day one on the Steam machine, because this thing is being built to be used in your living room. And I know for PC people, you could just open up the browser and go to these websites and stream it that way, but there's just something that feels a little more official and a little more nice when you have an app set up. Like on my SteamOS PC upstairs, I use Vacuum Tube, which is like a clone of the YouTube TV app. It's awesome. It works with a controller right out of the box, and people use it on their Steam Deck as well. So like having the official Android apps would be pretty cool. So if you're still here at the end of the video, I'll give you my update on why I haven't been playing a lot of games lately. And it's because I've just been digging into Linux, and it's all because of Indiana Jones. So I really have been wanting to play this game, but I don't really buy games day one anymore because I can't deal with performance issues and unfinished games. And it seems like lately every game is coming out like 80% done, and then 6 months later it's finished. So I just wait for that because, you know, the game ends up being cheaper and I get a finished game at the end of the process. So I finally got Indiana Jones, and at first it was amazing. Like I absolutely love this game, but then I get to the Vatican and every door I walk through causes a major stutter down to like 45 FPS for like 4 or 5 seconds. At the beginning of the Vatican, I was like fine to deal with it. I thought it would get better as time went on. Then I get to a part where I enter the Sistine Chapel, and that is like 50 million rooms. So like every door I walk through, it's like you're walking full speed and then you're like slow motion, and it's just not good. So I start Googling, and it turns out that the RAD-V driver has this issue, but the AMD VLK driver does not have this issue. So I go look that up. Apparently they discontinued it, but you can still download it, and you can't do it on SteamOS. So I switched back to Bazzite, and I figured out how to download a raw driver, package it, and then point to it with Steam with just Indiana Jones to use just that driver with just that game. So I figured all that out. It works fine in desktop mode. I'm like, yes, I fixed the stuttering issue. Then I go back to game mode, and apparently there's some block in place in game mode that stops you from using that external driver wrapper. So I was like, crap, this isn't going to work. I switched back to SteamOS, and then my friend Felix from DeckFilter, I was bitching to him about this entire situation, and he sends me an article from Gaming on Linux that says, oh, the same problem happens in Doom the Dark Ages because of how this driver works with IDTech 7. We're going to fix it in Mesa 26, which is coming in January. So I wasted a bunch of time, but it was super interesting using console to download the driver to the right folder, and then editing the JSON file to like point to that specific folder, and then coming up with the command to put in the game's properties in Steam to point to that folder, and then like using a driver specifically for one game. It got the neurons activated. So now I'm on like eBay and Facebook Marketplace trying to find a decent AMD, all AMD laptop that I can install SteamOS or Bazzite on to learn more Linux, because I don't know, it's become a weird little hobby for me and it's really interesting. So yeah, that's what I've got going on. Let me know what you're doing down in the comments below. As always, guys, my name is Jimmy Champagne. I'll see you in the next one. Thanks for watching, and shape on.